I didn't know the acronym IVR. I didn't know about enterprise voice applications. I didn't know about telephony. I didn't know anything. To be honest, really, all I knew is that when I call Chase Bank, I knew it didn't have to suck as much. 10 years ago, the consumer applications for voice AI were like Siri, Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant. You could set alarms with them, you could get directions, blah, blah, blah. Now, I think the power of like the OpenAI advanced voice mode, people are spending hours a day talking to these things. That I think is truly new.
Weird benchmark that I have for these things is I know that it's hit an inflection point when people are falling in love with it.
If there's anyone to be bullish, it's probably Apple and Google on the like consumer voice app space. And the reason for that, right, is literally all of my data is on this thing. And so in that sense, like, why does Siri suck? I think is really the question. And I think the answer is like,
Lily Clifford, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you here. You're building Rime AI, and we're going to ask you a lot about Rime AI. But what I want to start off with is a lot of people are tuning in right now. For folks who are sort of like, high level, understand what's going on in AI, they understand what's going on with, image models, video models, text models, but audio models are sort of underappreciated, and there's lots of cool stuff happening there. So for folks who are tuning in and maybe hearing about audio models for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening in this space and why it's so exciting?
yes, 100%. So just for quick context, I am the CEO and a co-founder of Rime. We train voice AI models for enterprise real-time voice applications. And it's true, like a lot is happening in voice AI. I also think in many ways, voice AI is like the OG AI. And what I mean by that, right, is like not so much the case anymore, but it used to be, right? Like, and I think they just ended this recently. When I'm on the BART platform, I commute from Oakland to our office in San Francisco. I used to hear TTS reading a text-to-speech reading out the BART train announcements, and that TTS was trained by Bell Labs in the late 90s.
Oh, wow.
And that was on the train platform even as of like last year.
Oh, wow.
And so I think very underappreciated that text-to-speech is in many ways like the OG generative AI has been solving for business use cases, whether it's like PSAs, right, in contact centers for these IVR systems. So it's true, a lot is happening. I would say too, that like the more things change, the more they stay the same. So like what have people's priorities been for voice AI over the last 20 to 30 years? Their priorities are that it works, that it has business outcomes, and that, right, like people enjoy talking to it. I do think like the really interesting thing now is like that in many ways, for the first time, consumer applications are out ahead of enterprise applications. And what I mean by that, right, is that like 10 years ago, the consumer applications for voice AI were like Siri, Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, right? Like you could set alarms with them, you could get directions, blah, blah, blah. Now I think like the power of like the OpenAI advanced voice mode, like not enterprise ready for what it's worth and not being sold to enterprises, but at the same time, right, like such a compelling experience that people are spending hours a day talking to these things. And so that I think is truly new, is like people talking to voice AI systems for hours a day. That we have never seen before. No one was talking to Amazon Alexa for hours.
That's fascinating. I had a couple other questions lined up, but you just said something there. So I'm sort of wondering, I've used ChatGPT voice mode. I think it's pretty incredible. We tested, Chirp and a few other models as well, 11 Labs and so on. What are people spending hours talking? Are we talking about like therapy stuff? Are we talking work stuff? Like, what are some interesting use cases you've seen around voice?
I think like brainstorming. I mean, the same way that people are using ChatGPT and I do too, right? Like to like, hey, I'm trying to write this email. Here's what my draft is. Can you help me? I think people are doing that, but over voice. Like I know for me, like I'm someone who really appreciates a phone conversation with my friends, and I will literally just get on the phone and walk in a circle for 2 hours talking to someone. Like I think that's the kind of application that is truly new. And people are doing that not for work stuff now. I mean, they
Yeah.
might be, but for like rehearsing a conversation, or it's very like, by the way, like Nathan Fielder, if you've watched the rehearsal, it's very much like that. I think people are very much like rehearsing things, getting feedback. It's really like a sort of intellectual emotional processing loop that people have, I think, with these models.
Yeah. So Hassan and I are currently building something in the space as a side project, and it's extremely exciting. And I find that true for myself as well. Like, I know this is an AI model, and occasionally it has like these, irregularities in its voice where it's like, kind of like wakes me up and it likes like, yeah, this is an AI. But I think
Right.
even when you know it's an AI, once you're 15, 20 minutes into the conversation, it does feel quite real, and it's easy to lose track of what's going on. That happens with ChatGPT text as well, but it's increasingly happening to me with voice models as well.
No, that's exactly right. And I think like the more that people By the way, like let me tell you a little bit about what we do. So like prototypically we've been selling to large enterprise contact centers that have what they call an interactive voice response system, right? So if you call Chase Bank, you will hear, right, like please listen carefully as our menu items may have changed. I mean, these are horrible applications, really. And people know that they're horrible. Like the people that own these applications, it, and by the way, not through any fault of their own, just through a limitation of technology over the last 20 years, like know that they're not great. And so the way that people have been thinking about the voice channel, like the toll-free number for Chase Bank, has been how can we get people to not use this, essentially? And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is like they're pushing people to digital, like the app. So
Yeah.
over the last 10 years. This is what you see in customer experience. I truly think that like there will be a revolution in the ways people think about these applications because like it never was the case that people were talking to ChatGPT like talking to a voice bot for 15 minutes. As soon as that becomes not only normal but expected, then there will be like an investment in the voice channel that has essentially never happened before. Right. So that like the KPI that people are maximizing for today in these voice applications, like when you call Chase Bank, they're tracking whether or not you hung up, press zero, or said agent. If you're not doing anything, any of those things, that is a successful call in their mind. And by the way, the industry standard for this metric, it's called call containment, is like 75%. That's like gold standard.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
how does that change, by the way, when they're not trying to get you to stop using this as soon as possible? They're like, how can we keep someone on the phone for longer? Like
Yeah.
that, I think is going to be truly interesting when you're like, oh, I'm on the phone. They're like, who are you on the phone with? Chase Bank, and I'm actually enjoying it.
Yeah, that's crazy. The actual the metric is that like how fast someone can go off. And so not
Correct.
just like a weird, and then that way you're not really improving the product. You're just trying to like say like, hey, well, how do we prevent people to use this? That's crazy.
At the same time, this is like in a McKinsey report as of the last couple of years that like more like call volume to the toll free number for enterprises is outpacing the increase in chatbot volume. Like more people are calling Chase Bank than ever before.
Interesting. Yeah, I think a weird benchmark, and please push back if you think this is absurd,
Sure.
but I think a weird benchmark that I have for these things is I know that it's hit an inflection point when people are falling in love with it, right? Like we saw this with character AI. We hear, people falling in love with ChatGPT. And I think the inflection point might be the first tabloid story in like New York Post or something where someone's fallen in love with the Chase Bank voice bot or something,
Yeah.
right?
No, literally, yeah. They're like calling up Chase Bank to like
Yeah.
flirt.
Yeah. So I think you said something very interesting there, right? Because for the first big insight that I'm getting here is for the last decade, B2B enterprise, they're trying to push people off of these phone calls into apps. I think everyone's had that experience where you have to navigate the menu and press so many different buttons and you can't get what
Yes.
you want. Then you're just like, screw this, I'll just go to the app. So all of us have experienced this. So that's number one. We might see the ushering in of voice. Are there any other big high level insights or maybe inflection points in what's technologically possible that you've seen in recent months and years?
I mean, it's easier than ever to build a voice application. I think that's truly new, right? Like I think for the first time, like it used to be the case that like in order to build, say you're building phone ordering for Domino's Pizza, right? Like the amount of front end work you would have to do to spin that application up is quite literally like it's like an infrastructure project, right? Like understanding everything that customer wants to do when they call into Domino's. Like this is why this was happening on an RFP basis for so long, is because like some consultancy would have to spin up like a 40-page doc that would spec out the entirety of the architecture of this application. That in some ways is still true. Like to build an actually high impact voice application, there's still a lot that needs to happen, right? Like but you're not seeing the amount of front end work that it once required. And so this is one of the reasons why you have, right, like platforms that make it easy. You can buy a phone number on Telnix or Twilio. You can link up 3 models, right, like an LLM to speech recognition and speech synthesis. And with a single prompt, I can call a phone number and be like, this is basically what the Chase Bank IVR system does, but like I did it in 2 minutes. Like that is truly new. And I think at this point, pretty underappreciated. Does that mean that like this single prompt system is enterprise ready? No, it doesn't mean that it's enterprise ready. But like I still think we're feeling the effects in the market on just the sheer fact of how easy it is. And this is by the way why people are talking about eval so much. Is because a lot of the work that used to be on the front end is now on the back end, right? Like in terms of QA. But yeah, no, I think we barely scratched the surface of this. And from our experience, like enterprise contact centers, and the reason why I'm focusing on so much on that is essentially like who we're talking about at Rime every day. Like the adoption curve of LLMs is just starting, and so a lot of this has yet to be felt for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Rime. You're in academia, you're doing a PhD. What's the core problem, agitation, or insight that got you to leave that and start the company?
No, it's a great question because I didn't know anything. I didn't know the acronym IVR. I didn't know about enterprise voice applications. I didn't know about telephony. I didn't know about I didn't know anything. To be honest, really, all I knew is that when I call Chase Bank, I knew it didn't have to suck as much. And the reason why I knew that is because I was working on voice AI research at Stanford, working on low resource language speech recognition, working on voice biometrics problems, and sort of as a side project got into text to speech. I think text to speech is probably the most interesting modeling problem. And the reason for that is really that, like, if you think about speech recognition, right, like transcribing what I'm saying right now, it's really a many to one problem, right? Like, Hassan, you can say the same sentence that I'm saying. Zane, you can say the same sentence that I'm saying. And we expect that the model should transcribe it the same, right? Like, even though we're saying these things in different ways. Whereas text to speech is really a 1 to infinity problem, right? Like, given a string of text, it can be said in an infinite number of ways, right? Along accent lines, along gender lines, just like emotional lines. Like, these are all super nuanced modeling problems. And that's why I got into it. It's just much more a creative process. And so in order to tackle that problem, again, knowing nothing about how these applications work in production, I was like, we just need to collect a bunch of data. So we built a recording studio in San Francisco and then started and we have been over the last 4 years collecting an extremely large proprietary data set of conversational speech, bringing in people, having them have a conversation with a friend or family member. And it was on the basis of that data that we started tackling this problem of like, when I call Chase Bank or when I call Verizon, it shouldn't sound like the 20th century American radio voice. It should sound like someone I want to talk to. And so that's really how we started tackling the problem, is first from a data perspective, and then secondly from a modeling perspective. And then I think third too, just understanding what these teams of developers who are building these applications care about over and above just like, is this a voice I want to talk to? And it turns out there's a lot of those things. Latency is one of them. Accuracy of pronunciation is another. Customizability of pronunciation is a third. I would say like there's another 15 things in that list. And so that's why we're still so excited to be tackling this problem.
Yeah. I want to, later on in this interview, I do want to get down into those specific things, and especially what builders should be evaluating. But high level, I want to talk a little bit more about Rime. There's a lot of stuff out there in the market right now. 11 Labs, some people might have heard of it. ChatGPT Voice, I'm assuming most people have heard of it. I know Google has some models as well. For someone who's like really new to the space, like how should they be thinking about Rime?
They should be thinking about Rime like we make it really easy to never have to worry that the bot is sounding good or saying the word in the right way for a real-time use case. And so like, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, IBM, they have text-speech models. Oftentimes what we're seeing in deals is like those players, not like our innovative startup competition. I would say, right, like the exciting thing about voice AI is that this is not going to be winner takes all. And what I mean by that, right, is like because modeling is so sophisticated and the sources of data is so varied, it really makes sense that like someone will create a really compelling model and set of applications and workflows around static audio content generation, right? Like where static audio content generation means like a YouTube pre-roll advertisement or a TikTok voiceover. Although weird, by the way, just as an aside, like one thing I find really interesting is that like people are really drawn to a robotic TikTok narration voice, like even when they
Yeah.
could be using it. And I think that's just sort of fascinating thing to think through. But yeah, definitely like where folks are using Rime is in really high volume calling applications where things need to be pronounced correctly. The reliability of the API needs to be there. Yeah, there are people who are using Rime to make really amazing user generated content like uh avatars reading out, chat books and chapters from the Bible and different voices. All this stuff's super exciting, but definitely like 99.9999% of our API volume is conversations that are happening over the phone at a drive-through kiosk, and so that's really where we're playing.
Yeah, so really like been an awesome conversation so far. So really curious, right? Like or over the last few weeks and months, actually, I've seen a lot of open source models also starting to come out around voice, and some people are saying like, hey, we're better than X and better than Y. And some seem to be claiming like, hey, we're world class. From your perspective, how do you see the open source kind of model kind of capabilities right now in the voice space relative to then Rime as well?
I mean, the open source stuff is so incredible. I mean, it's incredible, like that people and I in many cases I agree with the teams who are building these applications. Like the recent Qt release, I think is really particularly impressive. I would say, like, from a model provider perspective, like someone who, as a team, builds, deploys, and sells foundation models, we always need to be ahead of the curve from the open source stuff. But obviously, we like learn from the stuff that's happening in open source. I would say, like at this point, like the data advantage is huge. Like I encourage people like these open source models, like type in a phone number. Like my phone number is, 415-123-4567 and see. I mean, these are the kinds of benchmarks that people aren't thinking about, but like that's the data that's uniquely not in open source speech data sets. Like my credit card number is 1234567 and like that is the stuff that our customers care most about, I would say. And so it's sort of interesting. Like I think we know like these models are going to be increasingly lifelike. They're going to be increasingly fast. They're going to be trained on tens of millions of hours of data. They're not today, but they will be. And when that happens, right, the capability level of capability will continue to increase. And by capability, I mean, right, like um, how nice it is, the fact that it generates word level transcripts and timestamps while it's speaking, that you can run it on more and more performantly. But I would say, like, at the end of the day too, and I've talked with teams, right, who are shipping some open source speech stack as part of their, say, like an inference offering. And I just tell people, like, you will be running professional services if you put this model into production, because someone will come to you and they will say, hey, listen, I'm building food ordering for Taco Bell, and this open source speech model is mispronouncing gordita, and there will be no way to fix it. And I really think that's good because, like, for better or worse, and I think mainly for worse, there's not a lot of linguistics expertise within the machine learning speech practitioner community. And so, like, one of the trade-offs of training on larger amounts of data is that you have fewer and fewer linguistic insights into what that data looks like, and therefore the users downstream of the model will have fewer and fewer tools for customizing the output of those models. That's just reality today and will be for the foreseeable future. So I'd say, like, the open source stuff is super exciting. Like, I think everyone learns from it. And again, like, I'm sure so many people have said this on your podcast, and they say it because it's true, not because it's Coke. But like, this is a tide that's raising all boats for sure. And like, I say, bring it on.
Well, no, I think like obviously open source is a great way to learn, test, and iterate, and like see like if you're even directionally in the right place or not. But I think like you raised like two really good points, right? Like you have certain limitations around what you can do with the open source model, especially if you want to have enterprise grade outputs you're looking for. And second thing, which I found really interesting, the phone number and the credit card example, is that what is truly your own benchmark for your output you're looking for? Like, what is your internal way of like testing a model? Like, like a model may perform really well on a standardized benchmark, but is it relevant for you or not? I think that is a very key thing.
Yeah, I want to say like we to date haven't participated in a lot of the like online benchmarks for TTS. And the reason for that is I think I fundamentally take issue with the way that they're structured. And let me give you an example. Like, of course, we can run like a battery of tests, right? Like we can generate a bunch of really complex sentences, use an ASR model to generate transcription for the TTS output, and then calculate a word error rate just to ensure, right, like very little hallucinations. I would say like high fidelity to the input text. It would be a non-starter for Rime to ship a model where there was low fidelity to the text. That like customers sent us, right, like 10 numbers and we only read 9 of them, deal breaker. But like people do ship these models today. And I think like the reason for them is like for shipping them is because in many cases these models are highly expressive. They're like, they're sexy. But I would say like our customers, like that would be like a total deal breaker. And so you could run those tests. I would say like today we have a pilot process by which people essentially like are optimizing for an outcome, a business outcome. It might be in some cases call containment, that metric I mentioned earlier, right? And they want to say like, hey, if we're using Google today, let's route 10% of that traffic to Rime and then see if call containment goes up. And in every pilot that we've run of this kind, it has, right? And that's just because people literally enjoy listening to the voice more. They're more willing to put up with, right, like calling a bank, which no one generally likes to do today. So I would say like, to bring it back to the notion of like a more public benchmark, I mean, what people do is, right, like you put two samples side by side, the same sentence, right? But then like two samples, one TTS model reading one TTS model reading, and a different TTS model reading the same. And then you just ask people, what do they prefer? Right. But like a lot of times these like benchmark arenas are on sentences that like our customers would never read out. It'll be like the Milky Way galaxy is okay. I'm going to totally demonstrate how much of an idiot I am about astrophysics. But the Milky Way, did you know the Milky Way galaxy is 15 light years across, whatever? No one is sending that to the Rime API today. They're sending like, hey, thanks for calling. Here are some things you can talk to me about, right? Like, and so I do feel like, again, this goes back to what I'm saying. Like, there's so many different ways of speaking, right? There's so many different ways that humans speak. Yeah. Like, there's no benchmark that captures all of those things.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I think I saw you guys recently did like a partnership, like focus on Arabic language as well. Clearly, like like languages, dialects, all of those things are changing as well. So there's a huge opportunity. So one question I have is that, and we briefly kind of touched on it, is where does Rime fit in the current voice agent stack? Like, and in my head, the current stack is speech to text, text to LLM, and text to speech. And will this become speech to speech eventually, or would it stay like this?
I think it will become speech to speech eventually. I would say like for the foreseeable future, and by foreseeable future, I mean like the next 6 to 12 months. Like I do think people will be building these models, these applications in the way that you just described. I do think there are really exciting possibilities that are, I wouldn't describe them as like halfway between that 3-part architecture and a speech-to-speech architecture. I mean, they're so insanely underexplored. Like you could train an LLM that also generates audio tokens, right? Like you can train, and this is some of the really exciting work that for example, like Zach and the team at Fixie are doing with Ultrabox is like training an LLM that takes audio tokens and predicts text. Like there's so many of these like really unique building blocks that are essentially underexplored. And the reason, by the way, that people are drawn sort of in a sort of Silicon Valley discourse perspective to speech is because no one wants to bet against end-to-end models, right? Like everyone likes the thinking from a business perspective that like someone will hit an API with speech and we'll give them speech back and their application will just work. I think that's like a really incredible vision, and I just don't see it happening. And at the same time, I think that really sucks the air out of the room for like really innovative, truly innovative stuff to happen. What I mean by that, right, is like, I can imagine you could build $1 billion company, think about like a Predabase. Like you could build $1 billion company with like one-click fine-tuning for voice agents, where what you're fine-tuning is an open source LLM on the domain of data that you're building for, whether that's food ordering or like a bank IVR use case. And then at the same time, have it generate speech that sounds exactly like your users want to hear it, right? Like that I think is truly underappreciated. And so like speech to speech, yeah, definitely, maybe, maybe how I put it for my way of thinking the rest of 2025. But like we should also be thinking very creatively about what else remains to be explored.
100%. And obviously, I think like voice still, as you said, like a lot of things have started getting unlocked with this recent generative AI LLM wave, but there's so many different applications, especially dialects, accents, use case, verticalization. There's so much there. And it's very hard to be like one fit all voice model, which like in a text based model, like a chat GPT or like Anthropic, like, maybe not much easier, but like slightly easier than like, what voice is, because like you don't have those accents, you don't have like verticalization constraints which you may have like on the questions which may get asked like specifically on the
Oh,
voice.
100%. Yeah. I think like just to jump on that really quickly, like I often think that next token prediction is essentially a data processing primitive in the same way that like databases are a data structure primitive. And think about how many companies are think about how much value is created on top of databases.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
100%.
and to think that of course there's Oracle, there's Oracle, whatever, but like there is to it would be like saying that databases were winner takes all in like the 80s and 90s. It
Yeah.
would be an insane thing to think now.
Yeah, I think I work at Snowflake. When Snowflake was built, a lot of people said like, hey, databases are a solved problem.
Yeah,
And
100%.
clearly Databricks and Snowflake have built like some of the most iconic companies in the last 10 years in databases. So clearly, there are so many other companies, vector databases, all these things happening as well. So there's so much always to do. One question actually talking about this traditional like large players in the market. So Siri has struggled on voice, and
Uh-huh.
reportedly Apple is now talking Anthropic and OpenAI to supercharge it. I'm just curious, as someone who's been in this voice AI space, following this market, what do you think about Apple's strategy and like what can they do with Siri?
If there's anyone to be bullish about, it's probably Apple and Google on the like consumer voice app space. And the reason for that, right, is like all my data, like literally all of my data is on this thing, right? Like from my calendar to my email to my contacts list. Like when it comes to what I can do in Anthropic on the voice mode, in practice and in theory, it's probably like 1% of what I could do on my phone, right? In terms of the data that Anthropic has access to versus what Apple has access to. And so in that sense, like why does Siri suck? I think is really the question. And I think the answer is like there is an innovator's dilemma. And there's probably like 20 teams that are responsible for different parts of the application. And I don't know. Sometimes I think it would have taken like a Steve Jobs to figure it out. I don't know enough about what's happening at Apple or on the Google Assistant or Amazon Alexa, but like if there's any excuse, it's just like this is like an organization of 100,000 people that doesn't know what they're really trying to do. They're doing a fine job of selling the hardware, so why do they care? To the extent that they're in a battle with OpenAI, it hasn't really truly materialized yet. And so I don't know. I mean, it's a shame. I think we all know it's a shame. I think that's what we all agree on is that it's like both a shame and probably embarrassing too.
Yeah. On the Apple thing, I think Daniel Gross said this, that Apple genuinely does, because he worked at Apple, and he said that he genuinely believes that the leadership team takes privacy very seriously. So Apple might not just culturally be aligned to collect this data in the same way that a Google is, for example. Like Google has decent voice models. I've checked them out, but Apple doesn't have anything even close to it. It seems at this point. I want to pivot the conversation a little bit towards a few thoughts that I've been having around like the role that voice is probably going to play in the coming years, and why I think it might be a little bit underestimated. So, weird story that I want to start with is
Sure.
a few months ago, I realized that like I could probably plug some kind of nice voice model into this video avatar generation things, and I could probably go post these videos on Instagram. And I'd seen a couple of creators do this. So an interesting experiment that I ran recently is I plugged 11 labs into Heygen, which is basically just generates like video avatars for you. And I was able to grow my Instagram following from almost 0 to 50,000 plus in just a couple of months. And I was sort of like mind blown by this experience. But what the experience taught me, I had to work very closely with the audio and with the video. And the core realization was that when it comes to watching video or communication in general, the quality of the audio actually matters a lot more than the quality of the video. Like if the quality of a video drops from 4K to 480p, it's still watchable. But if the quality of the audio halves, suddenly things become very unwatchable. And I had the same thought. I don't know, as thinking a little bit more about it. Um, I keep in touch with my family over like WhatsApp. My parents live in another country, so I have to like communicate with them over WhatsApp. That's sort of like been my life for quite a while. Even in communication, seems like video just isn't as important as audio perhaps is, right? I mean, text is obviously more convenient, but if you had the option of having audio on, you'd probably go audio on, right? I think it
Mm.
says something that the movie with Scarlett Johansson's voice and Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, she wasn't just texting with Joaquin Phoenix.
No, she wasn't texting, and it wasn't video. It was primarily voice, which is the interesting part because it probably could have put video inside it as well. So my sort of like question to you is do you think that there's an argument to say that our primary mode of interaction with AI is going to be voice?
Yes. And the reason why I think that is like we can project so much more onto a voice than we can to text or video, right? Like when we hear a compelling voice, we project a lot of onto it that we don't, right? Like in the same terms, so like a video that has no sound or just a picture of someone talking. And I think it's really because like voice is very central to who we are as people, psychologically, emotionally. I would say to your point, right? Like here's another example that kind of piggybacks off what you're saying. I watched the NBA finals, right? Like there was one exception that I think proves the rule. Every commercial has voiceover, right? Like even though something like many times people are watching this like, in a bar without the audio on, there's closed captions. The one exception was like the Polestar, this electric car. They didn't have any voiceover, and the reason why is because it stood out as unusual. But every commercial has voiceover, and so like why? And why when I'm watching the game, I don't want to watch the closed captions, right? Like I want the play-by-play announcer, right? And like I think we all know what a good play-by-play announcer sounds like. And we may have favorites, right? Like my co-founder Brooke, she really likes watching the Portland Trailblazers because the play-by-play announcer Kevin Calabro is the same guy that she grew up watching for the Sonics, right? Like, and it's literally this very deep sense of nostalgia, right? Like, and so to your point, why will voice be the primary mechanism by which we interface with AI? It's because it's so much more personal, and at the same time, right? Like we can multitask, we can be walking around, pacing. I can be right, like doing. I don't know. It's just like it's kind of the perfect combination too, like synchronous, asynchronous. I don't know. That's my take. But again, I'm the kind of person who would talk on a phone with a friend for 2 hours just looking at the ground.
Yeah. Is there any reason why we haven't seen a serious play at having a device that's always on an audio? Is this like a cost issue? Is there like a technical barrier? Like, why haven't we? It makes no sense to me.
People try this. I think like with anything hardware, there's just I don't know if I have an overarching take on hardware. Maybe I should in light of the like IO and Johnny Ive and everything. Like maybe I should have a overarching take on hardware and voice AI interfaces. But I think like at this point, maybe my take is just like we all have a phone. And it's so funny. Like I do feel like with the VR headset stuff, like I don't know what you guys think. Maybe you guys have an opinion. My main opinion is like I remember whenever it was 2007, 2008. I know I was in high school at that point, being like, I want an iPhone. Like, and it wasn't just like dorks that had iPhones. Like everyone, this doesn't kind of happen overnight. And I feel like I don't know what's going to take to unlock like new hardware paradigms, but I think primarily it might be because like people, well, I don't know, people making these applications are sort of out of touch in a way that they weren't 15 years ago and what people actually wanted. I don't know what you guys think, but like my take is like someone to answer your question, Zane, I don't think people want that right now. but maybe they will. I don't know. I don't really know.
Yeah, I think the story, like the doomsday version of the future is that AI is so compelling that we constantly want to be plugged in. Like that might be a little bit overestimated, because I mean, I've worn VR headsets. They feel pretty compelling. And then half an hour after you've used them, you're like, oh, I don't know, man, this kind of clunky. Kind of gives me a headache. I don't know if I want to be plugged into this for too long. Uh, and I don't know. But when I have headphones on, I can have headphones on for hours and hours and hours. Like I recently bought a pair of headphones because they lasted for 7 hours instead of like the previous one that lasted for 6 hours. I was happy to pay an extra $100 for that. So, yeah, I think an audibly realistic AI is probably a more compelling value proposition for me than a visually compelling one. I think it's also because the audibly compelling one is less scary as well, right? Like if I'm glued into this like box all
Yeah.
day, even with these glasses, and like it's like my mind is playing tricks on me. But if it's just in my ear, I'm just listening to it. Like it's fine. I know this is AI.
The headset is also like very uncomfortable, I feel like hardware wise. So I think like a combination of like voice, where if I'm wearing glasses, like it just feels natural to me that, hey, like I just talk to my AI, like, hey, can you open up this email? And it just pops
Yes.
in front of me. That would be like a very seamless experience. Like I don't like I won't not want uncomfortable glasses to like wear for that.
Here's a sort of historical thing to remember too, because I was cleaning out my mom's closet. My mom in the 90s was a sales consultant for education software. She's now a public school teacher, but she was selling essentially like mech, like Oregon Trail to for Apple, really, and Sun in the 90s. And I was cleaning out her closet and I found one of these. I'm gonna share my screen. I know people who are listening can't see this, but
Oh
this is the
yeah.
Wikipedia page for the Apple Newton.
Yeah.
This predates the iPhone by 15 years and was sold for 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, say the Apple Vision Pro exists for 5 years. What's going to happen in 10 years, in 15 years? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is, people sometimes think that this is like a flash in the pan, and in some cases it is. But like, that's not the, that's not the game. That's not the time horizon of the game that we're all playing.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to
No, no, of course, yeah.
draw people's memory to the Apple Newton because I found one of these new in box. I don't know what they sell for. I didn't look on eBay.
Yeah, I know. The Meta glasses have been a big improvement over like the clunkier headsets that I've used. So I think that potentially, like, is a more compelling vision for the future of how we're going to use these things. Um, I have a little bit, a few sort of, for builders who are listening to this, who are just getting into this. As we've been building for a bunch of different technical and cost reasons, what we've done with, this sort of like experiment that we're running on the side is we sort of like, have a reasoning model as the foundation. And then we have like a text to speech model at top of it that kind of, says it in a realistic enough way where the
Mhm.
use case that we're trying to get it for works. If someone is just coming into the space, how should they evaluate number one, like the models? Like, you talked about latency, a couple other factors. Like, what are like the 2, 3, 4 key benchmarks you think they should look at? And then it comes to configuring, right? Like with text, you can just plug in like a GPT-4 or something and it works. But with audio, there seems to be a little bit more scaffolding that you need. So those two questions are new. What are maybe some recommendations to beginners?
Sign up for Rime. Go to rime.ai, sign up. Start playing with our console. I think the Rime console is something we're investing in. This is essentially like a voice interface for building voice interfaces that we're exploring. And it's essentially like it is in many ways like using the same scaffolding that our customers use, like a speech recognition model, a text-to-text model in the form of an LLM, and then rhyme voices. But it allows you to do things like configure the prompt on the fly, make adjustments to the system prompt just by asking, changing the voice, right? Like I think a lot of these things are really underappreciated when, right, the prototypical experience of building a voice application is like stringing three APIs together, where one of the fields is like the voice. And sometimes these voice parameters, depending on the provider, are like hashes, so like 16 character hashes. You're like, oh, I wonder what for lowercase b, c, d, j, I wonder what that voice sounds like, right? And I think like very underappreciated element is like what voice and what for what application. So definitely give the Rhyme console a try. Um, I would say like there are growing pains that it's just the fact of the matter. Like the application that Chase needs to build is different from one that like character AI needs to build. That's just the reality, and like that's what's so exciting about this space is how many different kinds of applications there are. And so like if if the voice can't pronounce JP Morgan, it's a problem for Chase. Maybe it's not a problem for character AI. You know what I mean? And so like I think everyone kind of needs to determine what their own benchmarks are. For some applications, latency doesn't matter, right? Like if you're creating Instagram videos, it doesn't really matter if the model takes a second to respond, right? And so I think like I struggle to provide concrete thought leadership. I can provide a lot of concrete data on if you're building enterprise voice applications in real time, right? Like we know, for example, that for every 100 milliseconds of introduced latency, someone's 10% more likely to hang up.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and the reason for that is like the same reason that like when you reduce the Amazon.com page load, I forget what the statistic it is, like 5% top line revenue increase when you decrease the Amazon.com page load by
Wow.
100 milliseconds. It's crazy.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
TLDR, what I'm trying to say is it depends. And that's what's so exciting. It's not like these things are one size fits all at this point.
One thing I'm always like kind of thinking about this voice is as these voice models get better is that also the number of scam calls actually gone up. So I get insane amount of like scam calls. I think like maybe 20, 25 a day now. And this did not used to happen like a year ago. You obviously have issues around like deep fakes with video and voice models getting better. What are your thoughts on this space overall from that perspective?
I think there needs to be regulation for a lot of this outbound calling that's happening. I mean, we power a lot of it for what it's worth, the TCPA and CCPA compliance stuff. I would also say like consumer behavior will need to change. I mean, I think and it will. And to plug one of our customers for a minute, there's this company Mirage Security. They build these phishing simulations for security teams at large enterprises. So like to use these banks as a use case, right? Like it is now, okay, I can't speak in concrete terms to this, but it's regulated by New York State that there needs to be some simulated voice phishing that's happening for these financial institutions. And so what Mirage will do is they'll use Rime, we'll create a deep fake of like the chief finance officer, in some cases, chief information security officer's voice, and they'll call every help desk agent and ask for credentials, in some cases, send them two-factor authentication codes, all this stuff, right? And what they find is they're getting passwords like 10% of the time.
Oh, wow.
And the average time that these help desk agents are talking to the bot is like 45 minutes. So like, again, this is a stressful situation, right? Like your CEO calls you and is like, hey, I'm locked out of my Google Workspace account. You need to log me in right now. Like it's stressful, but like there's no reason why that's not going to happen on a consumer level. And it's happening. I mean, this just happened MGM with the scattered spider stuff. That was a voice attack. So to answer your question, I don't really know, but like, I don't know. I'm not in favor of it. I think it's horrible. And so there's not a lot we can do from a modeling perspective. Like these models are only going to get better and better. It's also going to be harder and harder to fingerprint these models and watermark them.
Yeah, that is my question. Like, so like from fingerprinting watermark, are we able to create evaluation models in some perspective where if someone wants to know, is this like a AI voice or a human voice, you're able to detect that? Maybe today that might be viable, but would that be viable in the long run as well?
It's not viable today, and it will certainly not be viable in the long run. I think like I may be contrarian in this perspective as far as like folks who are training these models, but I'm willing to be transparent and just say it is not possible today, and it will not be possible in the future to have some sort of classifier for determining this stuff. And the amount of work that it would take to get everyone on board, all the people who are training these models to settle on some standard, it would be useless because it can become easier and easier to train a model. Like a bad actor can do this with a GitHub repo. So like, why would it just doesn't make any sense to me.
That's crazy. But I guess like that also kind of talks about, I was listening to Jeffrey Hinton's podcast. He was on one of the major podcasts recently, and he said that, he thinks about AGI, he thinks about the risk from AI, and he's like, obviously I can't say like AGI is going to happen or there's a probabilistic outcome, but he's like, yeah, like AI is getting better. But the question is that like, hey, do we stop it? Because the benefits are also amazing. Like that doesn't make sense, right? So the regulation he says like, in Europe, he was referring to like the European regulation. He said, Europe has put regulations, but there's like a caveat, like these regulations don't apply on defense. So it's like, yeah, technically, like, they're like doing whatever they want to do for defense, but they're regulating everything else. So like kind of they're limiting the business impact, which is kind of a weird way of regulating. If you truly like the negative impact is in defense, so you should do that. Just wanted to, and I found that really interesting, like, hearing him talk about that as someone who has kind of contributed and built this industry we live in. Like he also thinks about all of these things, and there's no one framework to figure out what someone does.
No, and I think generally he's a little bit more doomer than I am, and at the same time, like, I do get also AI phone calls. By the way, I've got my first AI phone call powered by Rime the other day.
Wow.
And I also think I get way more text messages. Sometimes the text messages are way more compelling. They're like, so I don't know. I don't know. I don't think you regulate bad behavior out of existence in many cases, at least from, a modeling perspective. It makes no sense.
Yeah, it's a societal problem, right? Like you'll always have bad behavior. And I think like now as we enter this AI wave, like there'll be bad behavior of different types. So we just have to come up with a different model. But
it would be like regulating databases, because you could have like my phone number in a database to call me.
Yeah.
That's maybe a bad analogy, but I don't think it's too far off.
Yeah, I think like you just have to come up with like a new frameworks, because bad behavior will always stay.
Yeah.
One thing we're very curious about is that, what are AI tools you are using in your daily work and personal life? Any you can share with our audience? Like, always interesting for us to know.
I mean, I'm definitely a big Chat GPT user. I have to admit, like, I haven't yet to install vibe coding IDE, but my engineer is telling me, forcing me to try Claude Code this week, so I'll definitely try Claude Code. I have to admit, sometimes I'm skeptical. Like, I think in machine learning, it's like so much of it comes down to the data, and like Claude Code doesn't have access to what the data looks like. You know what I mean? Like, I do think there's so much room for like improvement in software development tools. But yeah, I would say like ChatGPT, big one for me. But like really like it is for everyone, I would say.
Amazing. That's helpful. So if you had a magic wand, what is one thing you would love to see in the voice AI space tomorrow?
I think everyone's getting on the same page about this, but just more educational content about what it takes to build an application and what outstanding problems there are. I think like the technology has changed so fast that like literally we're figuring it out. Like the people who are building models, the people who are building voice applications are figuring it out. And so like it's one of the reasons why I've been having really exciting focus groups with our customers, just on like what their tech stack looks like today, what it's going to look like in 6 months. Because I think like, yeah, more collaboration is maybe what I would say.
What's a recent advice in maybe last 1 week you got as running this company, like as a CEO, which you would love to share with someone?
You can only really do one thing well at a time, and you can't do two things half as good as that one thing at the same time.
Great advice.
Yeah. Rare.
Any advice you would have for new PhDs who are graduating or like recent grads?
Man, that's a good one. I think academia is in a really sad state, and it has been for a long time. And I would say like academia kind of brainwashes you into thinking that like academia is the only path for you. And I think there's a lot of this like alt-ac kind of discourse that's happening, which I think is good. But at the same time, like I think people need to learn as quickly as possible once they get out of a PhD, like what it means to be confident. Because I think it's not something that you learn during a PhD program.
What's a recent book you have read which you really enjoyed?
I'm reading Palo Alto right now by Malcolm Harris. And I'm not done yet, but it's very good. And I would say like gives a really strong foreground for like, I mean, it, from a very particular perspective, right? Which I'm not sure if he's like, would describe himself as communist or what it is, but like I really like that. I'm also reading this on the other side, and maybe not really the other side, is this anti-memetics book.
Oh, how is that? I keep seeing it on my Twitter, and I feel like I feel like Founders Fund is trying to psyop me into reading this book. Is it good?
Oh, I think they are. No, I think they are. As like literally, this book is about what a psyop is basically on social media, and so like it's kind of, I think they might be doing it ironically.
Yeah,
but I think effectively, and so I just want to say I started reading this before Dylan was posting about it.
cool.
Lily, this was awesome. Then do you have any more questions, or should we wrap up?
No, this is great.
Yeah, no, Lily, this is an awesome conversation. I learned a lot about like voice and AI, and hopefully our audience would learn learned something as well, like listening to this podcast. But I feel like I totally agree with you. I think there's not much of content around voice AI because like Zen and I, like, what we were talking about, like we are trying to build like 2 voice applications. And it took us like a few weeks, right, to figure out like what's the best model, how do you integrate this, okay, what are the tools to use. Even though we have been like doing LLM stuff for like
Yeah.
past few months, it was a bit of a learning curve to do that. And that's how I actually like learned about Rime as well. And then like Mugiz mentioned Rime as well. And without Mugiz, I think most probably would have taken way more time. But he was very
Yes.
trying to like guide us through the process.
Yeah. Shout out to Mugis.
Yeah, he gave some good questions for this podcast as well. Suzanne, like Mugiz actually works at Rime.
Oh,
Mugis is our
nice.
first engineer ever, and
Cool.
friend of the podcast, friend of the newsletter, and friend of Hassan.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I'd say like my overarching thought is like it's going to continue changing more and more every day, so we have to learn together.
100%.
Thank you so much for this. I came into this because I knew nothing about this, so I spent like a lot of time like digging into the space, trying to come up with questions, and I was like, man, I hope I have like good questions for this, and I hope this is like
That's
an
good.
conversation. But no, this was awesome. Like I learned a lot. So yeah, thank you so much for making the time for us.
Yeah, thanks so much, and yeah, just keep us posted on timeline. We're happy to co-amplify, probably boost it ourselves too. So, yeah, great to see you guys.